Today's guest is someone who's helped shape specialty coffee for over 2 decades. She's a former U.S Barista Champion, a sensory expert, and now leads sourcing at one of the most respected roasteries in the U.S, Counterculture Coffee. Katie Cargulio has seen coffee from every angle, from behind the bar to the cupping table to the farm. Today, she helps Counterculture build long-term relationships with producers and sources green coffee that aligns with their quality values and sustainability values. This episode is part of a series that we're doing called Creating the Coffee Menu, and this first episode is going to dive into sourcing green coffee. We'll unpack how the choices made at origin shape what ends up in your cup. We'll talk about what it really means to buy green coffee responsibly and how sourcing has changed. And we'll talk about what terms like direct trade and fair trade actually mean in 2025. Welcome to the pod, Katie Cargulio.
Woo! Yeah!
Thank you for that amazing introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. And I'm one of your hosts, Rowan Cook. I make coffee on the internet.
And I'm Ben Bicknell. I judge people who make coffee, but only in competitions. It's okay.
And you judge me as well as we do that. And together we are It's Just Coffee, the podcast for people who know it's never just coffee. Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick word from one of our sponsors, Apex Lab. Elevate your coffee experience with Apex Lab Mineral Concentrates. Apex Lab's precision-engineered formulas, including tonic, jam, and lilac, are designed to enhance the coffee's natural flavors. Not going to change it, it's just going to enhance it. It's going to bring out the vibrant acidity, the rich sweetness, or if you use lilac, it might bring out those delicate floral notes that you've been looking for. Trusted by world-class cafes and even barista champions, Apex Lab helps you unlock your coffee's full potential. Discover more at apexlab.com. Wait, where was that again, Sonam?
The internet.
Oh, okay. Thought I was going to say the website. Thanks. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors at Eco Barista. The reason I sound like this is because they got massages at our stand at Mice, and so I'm getting a massage while recording this message for you. They're the best sponsor of the pod that we could have had. They have the best eco products. This probably sounds really pornographic, but it's not. I'm just getting a massage. They have the best eco-friendly coffee products. They got coffee bags that you can design yourself. They got cups. They got iced coffee cups. They got everything you need. So make sure to support them because they support us. Head to ecobarista.com.au and get 15% off your first purchase when you sign up. Oh, mama, that's good. And what a guest we have on today. And, normally we do a bit of a dive into the person, but I want to start straight away with a hard-hitting question. Fair trade and direct trade seem like pretty similar terms here, but they're actually completely different. Can you explain the difference and what they mean in 2025?
Yeah, well, I think direct trade started as a purchasing philosophy actually in response to fair trade. A fair trade is basically a certification that guarantees that there was a minimum price paid for a coffee when it was contracted. To me, fair trade is a really good baseline. It's a good safety net for producers. It's not really the gold standard for the industry, nor should it be, but it's a start, and I kind of respect what it tries to do. The recent increase in the fair trade international price was a really big step in the right direction. And I think that the industry should aim to do better than fair trade, but we can still do that and value a system that ensures that producers aren't being exploited, right? That there's a minimum good enough price that's being paid. But a lot of specialty coffee companies don't see fair trade as something particularly, they see it as a really attainable price to pay for coffee, not something to strive for. And so when fair trade was gaining a lot of momentum in the industry, in the eyes of consumers as being something like, this means that my purchase is good, coffee companies wanted something that could communicate a higher standard than that. And so they came up with direct trade. And direct trade is a purchasing philosophy, I think, that emphasizes transparency, traceability, and fairness. It's basically a way to say, we know who we're buying from, we know what they're about, and we know how much they're being paid. Counterculture was one of the original roasters in the U.S. to have a direct trade certification program. And we were the unique roaster in that we had a third-party verifier for our direct trade standards. So for us, we spelled out what direct trade meant, and then we paid an organization to come in, look at all of our books and say, yes, this qualifies as direct trade. And we really hoped that that was going to be a model for the industry to kind of put some legitimacy behind the program. But over time, and I guess now in 2025, we've kind of realized that that label doesn't really capture all the nuance of coffee purchasing. For our program, especially because it was being third-party verified, not every coffee was able to be labeled as direct trade. And so we kind of realized that we were creating a false binary on our menu, kind of the good direct trade coffees, and then everything else kind of looked like they were bad coffees. So actually, a decade ago in 2015, we shifted our philosophy to 100% transparency. And now we just publish the FOB price for every coffee that we buy, and we put the traceability, we put the suppliers and the producers that we buy coffee from on every label. Even if it's a blend, there's a little spot on the back of the blend where we list the recipe that says what coffees are going into it. So, I do think that direct trade in 2025 could still have value, for a company that wants to have a framework for how to do things intentionally. I think it can be a good program. But for something that's consumer facing, and at least for counterculture, I feel like transparency is the core principle that guides us and kind of ties everything together. And rather than focus on like a one-off made up certification, we're focusing on trying to create a brand around doing things that really shows the integrity of our supply chain and is really taking steps to gain the trust of our customers.
I love that because I think there's that last point that you make there about the certification is something that a lot of people don't realize, right? That fair trade is a globally kind of managed and approved, stamp of certification. So it has all the checks and then it says, yes, you qualify to this. Whereas direct trade is a term that was kind of created and emerged kind of organically, but has never been centrally kind of moderated or certified. And so there's that challenge, right, of, every company around the world or many specialty companies are saying the phrase direct trade, whereas it could mean quite different things.
And did you say there was an increase in the fair trade recently? Could you explain that a bit more?
But it used to be the minimum price for any coffee was $1.40, and then there's a 20-cent premium built into fair trade. So it's essentially $1.60, but you pay, as a roaster, you would contract that coffee, and $1.40 would be the coffee price that would go to the supplier, to the organization, and then 20 cents would go into a fund that the cooperative needed to democratically vote on how to use the premium. If they wanted to use it for quality improvements, if they wanted to pass it on to producers as a second payment. That's essentially how that worked. And it was a couple of years ago that Fair Trade International, now this is going to get confusing, they changed the minimum price, I think it is to $2.80, and still have the 20-cent premium. They increased the premium for organic from 30 cents to 40 cents. So if you're contracting a Fair Trade International organic coffee, your minimum price is $2.40. Now, part of where this gets confusing, couple of things. Number one, I don't know if you know this, maybe it doesn't apply to some of the listeners out there if they're not based in the US, but there are two big organizations that have fair trade labels. One is Fair Trade International, another is Fair Trade USA. And previous to the increase in price, they both used to operate with the same minimum price, $1.40 plus 20 cents. Fair Trade USA decided not to increase their minimum price when Fair Trade International did. So you've got two labels out there that are guaranteeing two different things to consumers. And it's hard for me to keep track of the numbers. I know no consumer is keeping track of that. Another thing is that what's baked into the fair trade system is that the minimum price is always a minimum as long as the C market is under that baseline price. If the C market is over, the minimum is always going to be the higher price. It's going to be the C market price. So today, where the C market closed at $2.88. That is going to be the minimum price for fair trade coffee, plus a 20-cent premium, plus a 40-cent premium for organic. So that's also difficult for the organization probably to get brands to continue to buy into fair trade because they have to layer on all those costs on top of a high C market, which is where we've been. So I don't know. It's really hard. There's good and bad things, when everybody's out in the Wild West doing their own thing. All of direct trade kind of loses meaning, right? Because everybody has their own definition. And I think organizations also sometimes maybe have a little bit of blindness on where they can't think that there's not as much internal reflection about what they're doing and whether or not it's meeting a standard. If they just think everything that we do is direct trade, everything is good, then, how do you push yourself to keep improving if you don't have like a real framework for what it is that you're trying to achieve? But fair trade, that's why like having standards is great. But also when you have standards, and especially, you need to sell your product, you end up diluting the effectiveness, or you dilute the price, or you dilute what it is that you're trying to do to make it the most broadly appealing that it can be, so that you can have the most people that will buy into your certification, the most reach, the biggest organization. And maybe that's going to end up being a price that is appealing to a bunch of roasters, but not really competitive for producers at the end of the day.
And it's so interesting. Even all that aside, when it comes down to the general consumer, there's so much to try to digest or understand there. I think to your point of just being about full transparency of having it there, it's like, that's the best that you can do, where it's like, it's all the cards are on the table. You can see exactly what's happening. A lot of people aren't going to look or care, but the people who do can do it. And it is all there, which is the best way to, in my opinion, to kind of run it. But speaking of that and how you're doing it at Counterculture, we've kind of dived into the fair trade and direct trade kind of thing there, but could you just quickly introduce yourself and your role at Counterculture? Because it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I'm the Western coffee manager at Counterculture. Counterculture is the largest independently owned specialty coffee roaster in the U.S. We were founded 30 years ago in Durham, North Carolina. And we also have a roastery in the Bay Area, California, which is where I'm based. I live in Oakland and the roastery is in Emeryville. They're both like little suburbs of San Francisco. Something that's unique about Counterculture is that we don't operate our own cafes. We're just a wholesaler. So we just roast and sell whole bean coffee to cafes, grocery stores, and restaurants. And we support them with education in 12 training centers around the US and also online. My role as a coffee manager is basically just to make sure that we have the green coffee that we need to roast and sell and that it meets our standards. So because I'm based on the West Coast Roastery, I work really closely with the roasters here on the products and on recipes. And I also work closely with our marketing team to kind of shape how we tell the story about our brand and about each coffee. So I'd say my day-to-day is like a mix of sourcing, quality assessment, and storytelling.
Well, I feel like we're kind of kindred spirits, Katie, because for many, many years, I also worked for a coffee roastery down here in Australia, Five Senses Coffee.
Yes.
Which were essentially, we often kind of looked across the oceans and went, they're doing the same thing as we, wholesale only, training and education led, so training spaces and direct e-com. So we were kind of like looking across going, look at what Counterculture's doing. We're not alone. But it's a really interesting kind of different model as well without having your own cafes, especially I feel like in the US, it's a pretty unique space.
Yeah. I always think, I wonder if it could be accomplished today, if you could set up a brand without having brick and mortar. I think 10 years ago you couldn't. I think now you could do it with direct to consumer. Like you could just have an e-commerce brand that sourced coffee and had a really great online and social media presence and bypass the cafes.
Well, he's sitting right here, Katie. This guy
is
trying to do it. You called it.
Exactly. But it's still like, it's a hard thing to do, but it is good when you pick your lane and you focus, right?
Yeah.
Then you can try to think about, how do I do this one thing really well? How do we do customer support really, really well? That's the benefit of us not having cafes, is to be able to focus on that. a lot.
Do you think that that model has actually allowed counterculture also to focus on the sourcing and its supply chain even more deeply?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. Because everybody that works at counterculture too, it's like, is very into coffee. And we have good tenure. I think our average tenure is over 5 years. So we have people that are really committed to the brand and committed to the industry in a way that, like, you know, there's just a little bit more turnover in retail customer facing roles.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of get into this a little bit as we talk about procurement or sourcing structures and models. But I think there's a lot to be said about the focus for a business being able to hone in on being, as you said, really great at a particular lane rather than trying to be experts across everything. And I mean, Ron, you work with a lot of folks on the media and content creation. And, you know, if you're a hospitality professional trying to also run a social media account and also do people management and accounting and be great at coffee and all of these different things, it's like there's great times to really hone your focus in to build that momentum.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing with going, you know, as you're saying, direct to the consumer and that kind of stuff. There's a difference of, you know, paying salespeople to be out on the road to then managing cafes to getting machines in there and doing that. Our aim was that, you know, during COVID, a lot of people started getting espresso machines at home and doing that. And we were like, let's target the home market that maybe don't have the expertise on how to make the best coffee at home. We'll create education on how they can make it better, and we'll sell them the coffee and the equipment needed to make it better at home. And that's kind of exactly where we focus and what we do. And that's it.
Yeah. I know you know, we talked about you've been in coffee for over 2 decades, kind of earned the stripes. Can you cast your mind back? Was there a particular moment where the specialty coffee conversation or that direction really clicked for you that was like a catalyst for saying, I want to pursue this?
Yeah, I don't know if there was a moment. I mean, like a lot of people, I kind of fell into coffee by accident, and it happened when I was in a really impressionable age. So I was maybe 19, 20 years old in college, and I studied anthropology in college, which is, when you're studying it in college, is very theoretical. And I realized that I really liked the tangible work in coffee more than my classes. I did finish undergrad, but after school, I just kept on working in the coffee shop because I was learning more about where coffee comes from, connecting with roasters, learning about source. And I really liked how it connected, you know, trade, history, and culture, like all into one product.
I mean, okay, so a follow-up to that would also be, you know, over such a long career in coffee, I'm sure there are days, like for all of us, that it can be a drain, right? We've been at work. Were there any moments that recatalyzed that excitement for you in specialty that kind of got you reinvigorated and said, okay, I really want to stick with this?
Yeah, I think, there have been times when I've been more in love with the coffee industry than others. But I really think every time I have like an amazing cup of coffee, it's not just that it tastes good. It's something that actually makes me like stop in my tracks and think about what happened and notice the world just around me a little bit more. And I feel like that kind of influence is what keeps me motivated. Even when there were times when I was bummed out about either the industry, consumers' appreciation for the product, you know, whatever was going on in my own company. Like, I feel like there was a magical cup of coffee that was dropped in my lap to kind of refocus me and keep me going.
And I've heard you talk as well about World Coffee Research, and I feel the energy behind that. And you on the board, right, of World Coffee Research. Is this correct?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've been on the board of WCR since 2023. Counterculture was an original founder of WCR in 2012. And for a long time, maybe even almost a decade, the owner of Counterculture, Brett, was on the board. And so when he kind of stepped aside to focus more on the business, he nominated me to take his place, which is really amazing. I'm considering, you know, all of the awesome people that are on the board of WCR. But I guess broadly speaking, you know, WCR's mission is to secure the future of coffee. The way that we've focused on doing that, and they've gotten really laser sharp in this focus in the past 5 years or so, is through breeding better coffee varieties. So they're breeding coffee, they're doing trials, they're collecting data about quality, about yield, about what is working. And that's, I think, some of the most important work that can be done in coffee, because it hasn't been done collectively worldwide in a long time. And farmers are facing huge challenges, from growing coffee in a changing climate to figuring out how to operate profitably and getting better plants to farmers. Plants that are more resilient, more productive, and hopefully more delicious is a practical, scalable way to improve coffee agriculture. So on the board of WCR, I spend a lot of time actually making sure that I understand the science behind breeding, because it's really kind of complicated, and the implications of it, so that I can be, a good advocate for the work that WCR is doing, and then also a good decision maker on the board.
So how does breeding work in that way? So we're saying that maybe there are certain areas where it's harder to grow coffee, or the coffee kind of plants aren't as resilient and don't handle the climates. So what do they maybe take one varietal that is really resilient and then another one that tastes delicious but isn't as resilient, and try to bring them together to make something that's easier for farmers to grow but still produces a good quality cup? Is that kind of the breakdown in a really dumb layman term?
No. You nailed it. That is exactly the work. Your breeding program, the robustness of it, depends on the genetics that you start with. So the more genetics you have and the more you understand about those genetics, the better your results are going to be, because you're just going to have more diversity to be able to put together, right? You're not just going to be putting together the same 2 or 3 ingredients in your cupboard every night. You're going to have 50 things to work with. And then you also need, for coffee, because it's a perennial tree plant, you need time, because it isn't just about the first time you put something together and realizing that it's delicious. What farmers really want are seed-stable varieties. So if you've ever visited a coffee farm in the world, you've probably seen a little nursery that a farmer will have of little coffee seedlings, bags that they're growing and that they plan to replant on their farm. Most farmers are taking those from coffee cherries that they pick off of trees and then making their own little seedlings. They're not necessarily going to a nursery and buying new coffee. And even if they are going to a nursery, that's probably how the nursery propagated those plants. But it takes generations of crossbreeding in order to create a tree that their seeds are going to be true to type to the next generation. So in the first generation of a cross, what's called the F1 hybrid, you can have some amazing trees, but when you take the seeds from those trees and try to make new plants, they'll be one parent or the other. They won't be the mix. And so it takes about 5 generations to cross it back in. And so you need the genetics, you need the data to understand the genetics, and then you need the time to be able to breed good coffee. But one of the advantages that WCR has, and that we share with our members, I guess, is that we're not just working in one country or in one environment. We're actually partnered with coffee institutes in about a dozen countries around the world. And so we are able to we're sending them new coffee trees, genetics that they've never had, so that they can breed with them, they can monitor them and see how they're doing. But we're also understanding the data of how the coffee is performing in each of those environments. So, if you have a coffee institution like Seni Cafe in Colombia, number one, they might have a fantastic breeding program, but they don't have the world's widest genetics. They have the coffee genetics that they have, and they're also only growing coffee in one environment. So they're not actually able to breed coffee for new strains of rust that might be coming to Colombia. They're only able to breed for what exists there now. So their breeding program can get them some good coffees, but it's not exactly safeguarding the future of coffee if what they have is going to be susceptible to a strain of rust that already exists in India, for example. India deals with a lot of rust. So the fact that we have, coffee trees in Peru and in India, and we can see what's doing good in the India environment, and we can see what's doing good in the in the drought-stricken coffee producing countries. We're able to take that information and feed it back into the system and tell people which varieties are actually truly rust resistant globally, which ones are going to be best if you are dealing with drought in your region. And that's, that gets me really fired up. And that's why I think WCR is super important. And I just want everyone to know like that's the difference between having a kind of global cohort of people that are working together to make coffee better rather than just like one country or one company. That's a big philosophy, I guess, that I have is like, I want the industry, even as we're competitive with each other, like I want us to think about ways that we can like lift the whole thing up.
Grow together.
Instead of just like working in our own corner to do our own thing that like at the end of the day isn't really going to solve the problem.
And programs like that should make people, again, appreciate the cup of coffee that they're paying a couple of bucks for or whatever, the amount of time and effort, not only on the farms, but out there making sure that it's diverse and can grow. There's so much time and effort that is put into all of this. And then I just wanted to ask, going back for a little clarification, explain to me rust. I know, just so we get a little bit more detail on that.
I guess, I don't know if I've ever been asked this question before, so I'm going to have to like wing it. It's a fungal disease that affects coffee
I think
through
I've got
the
this.
leaf.
No, you don't have
so,
that's a different thing.
Oh, that's not rust? Okay, sorry. Continue. It's a fungal disease that's through the leaves,
They call it rust because it turns coffee leaves the color of rust. And that basically affects how the coffee feeds itself, right? Because we all know that trees feed themselves through photosynthesis, and that's through the leaves. And so if the leaf turns all brown and it can't access the sun, then the tree is going to suffer. And it's been a huge problem in coffee production. And there have been different outbreaks around the world in different countries that have, caused a lot of crop damage and loss of crop in the coffee industry.
Major consideration there in terms of security for farmers, right? Is that if you have a rust-resistant coffee variety, you're going to be a lot more calm about the coming seasons versus not. But often they have been kind of in contrast to quality in the cup sometimes.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yes.
I feel like I've looked at the past, like a lot of the time where it's like rust resistant. Is it like Robusta or like beans that are like maybe not the best tasting, but they're like, they'll grow like wildfire.
Exactly. And I mean, Robusta is the original kind of rust resistant species rather than an Arabica variety. But then a lot of those crosses have kind of got a little bit of that resistance.
Oh, Robusta.
Yeah.
We got there.
Oh, goodness.
We got there.
My apologies, Katie. Welcome. Let's kind of redirect our focus a little bit and come back to kind of that sourcing approach, which you've had a huge experience with. There's so many different ways that a roaster can procure and find the green coffee that they want. You've had huge experience across this area. Can you outline for us some of the most common kind of models or I guess approaches that you see different roasters, not just counterculture, but other people in the industry using to source and find the green coffee?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. I think one is buying coffee spot, which is like shopping off the shelf at a grocery store. You're kind of going in and you're buying whatever is available to pick out right now. A lot of times that can be a really high quality product, but there's a little bit less predictability involved. Are you going to find exactly what you're looking for at the store? And there's definitely less relationship behind it. Like you don't necessarily have a relationship with the producer of that product. The other way to do it is to forward contract. And that's kind of the counterculture approach. Last year, 97% of what we bought was forward contracted. And that means that we work with suppliers in advance of the harvest. We negotiate the terms of the purchase, like the price, the delivery schedule. We taste samples as the coffee's being produced. We get a myriad of samples and we get to actually choose the lots that we want to buy. And doing it this way, it locks us into making promises to buy coffee at a certain price at a certain time, which can be scary if that's, 4-6 months away. But it also gives us more control over the quality, the pricing, and the impact that our company is having. And for us, we feel like it's a really good way to build trust along a coffee supply chain, which matters a lot to us as well.
And when you're talking forward contracts with a supplier, are you talking like a coffee importer or an exporter or a producer group?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. For us, usually it starts either with the producer group or with the exporter. And then we bring an importer. The importers are always involved, but we bring them in to facilitate the business. We don't go to them and ask them to find a coffee for us. We're also buying a lot of coffee through long-term relationships. Like over 85% of the coffee that we bought last year was from suppliers, exporters, or producer groups that we've worked with for over 5 years or more. So we're kind of going back to the same cooperative or the same estate and contracting the coffee with them. And then the actual contract, though, is made with an importer. But there could be ways to do it if you're a smaller company and you really trust the sourcing program of an importer, especially if they're they're focused in a couple of origins and maybe they have long-term relationships. They're buying really deep into the supply chains that they're working with. A smaller company might consider forward contracting with just an importer, saying, how can we help you scale your business? You guys are the sourcing experts, but we want to have a positive impact in coffee. And so, we want to forward contract our coffee through you. But you can kind of peel back that onion as much as you want, depending on your size or how long you've been in the industry.
Does the spot purchases that you were mentioning, is that the area where it raises more concerns maybe about it being ethically sourced or making sure that it's, all legit, or is that not how it works?
That's a good question. I mean, it is the way that this is framed. I realize I'm saying like forward contracting is better. And so that means that spot coffee purchasing is worse. I don't know if I think that they're worse. They serve different functions. Certainly counterculture also buys spot coffee sometimes. Like if we're going to run out of a component, we will call up importers and say, I don't want to not sell my number one blend. So what can you give me that I can put in here? But I guess if I'm being candid, I think that importers are much more and need to be a lot more risk adverse than companies do. And they need to buy coffee at a price point and honestly a quality level that's maybe more broadly appealing in order to just kind of keep the mechanics of the business running. And so when you as a roaster are buying that, you're maybe not paying the most competitive price that you could pay to producers for coffee if you're buying it spot. Or maybe you're not really participating in a system that is really looking to push quality as much as it is when you're buying spot. It starts because, the importer might be contracting a coffee, at a modest price with a modest kind of quality target, just to be able to have coffees that they know that they have that are broadly appealing in the market to sell. But if you as a roaster are saying, well, I have pretty good margins because a lot of my business is direct to consumer and they don't mind paying more for coffee. And in fact, they want to have higher quality coffee than they can get this chain down the street. And so you might be more effective in incentivizing quality and getting better prices back to coffee farmers if you focus on forward contracting. Because you can say, I want the exporter and the producer to get this price. And in return, I want this level of quality. And then kind of the whole supply chain gets a little bit better. And the importer's still going to be involved. Like they're still going to bring that coffee in. They're still going to make their margin. I think they want relationships. They want business like that as long as everybody can keep their commitments, because they want people to get paid great prices for coffee and they want consumers to get great coffee too. But like the bread and butter of what they do maybe is not focused on maximizing that at all times.
So let's say you're starting a small roastery and you want to source ethical coffee. What would your suggestion be for going out and getting your first green coffee for the roastery?
Your very first green coffee?
Yeah.
I feel like you're going to have to buy a bunch of spot coffee. I think you're going to want to get to know importers really well and try to work with importers who are aligned with your sourcing values, right? That have the kind of quality and sustainability standards that you want to stand behind. And then ideally the next season, you can see what worked from that and what didn't, and then go back to that same supply chain and say, I want to buy that coffee again, and maybe next year I want to take part of my budget and I want to visit this cooperative. I want this to become a staple coffee on my menu. Not every coffee is going to work out that way, but you kind of start to build those relationships day by day and year by year. If you're a small roaster, you probably don't have the buying power to shape a supply chain completely on your own. But you can still ask great questions about your coffee. You can be curious about it. You can build strong relationships, definitely with the importers of your coffee. And you can keep your commitments, right? You can say what it is that you're willing to do and then follow through on that. I think that kind of curiosity and consistency can go a really long way in the coffee industry.
That's basically how we did it with Golden Brown. We had that, we found coffee that worked, and then now we have relationships and talk with the co-op and that kind of thing. So that works. So you're saying if I'm starting the small roastery, the best thing to do is just get on the phone, start conversations with these importers. And I mean, it's as simple as that. Just communicate. I want to reach these ethical standards. I want to pay the right amounts and that kind of thing. And you'll very quickly find the right people to be working with.
Right.
And I think, we've kind of gone through different journeys with, the specialty industry's relationship with importers and exporters a little bit. And there was the real trend towards like going, okay, we're going direct trade. This idea of middlemen, right, is out there in the industry. And there was a real pushback against anyone who's in between, the buyer, the roaster, and the producer. And I think that's kind of coming a healthy full circle back around to the realization and the change in business models for importers and as well about the need for skill sets and the value in these things. Because like Katie's saying, buying spot isn't necessarily good or bad. It has its limitations. You don't get to really craft a supply chain. You get, choose from what's on offer there. Right. And it comes with all of the background purchasing and the quality. But also it really reduces the risk for a roaster. Obviously there's a risk that they're not locked in to have their supply of green coffee, but it also means that their cash flow is a lot healthier. The coffee's literally there in country, like in Australia or in the US or in Europe, and they're buying it locally at a very specific price. And so cash flow is a lot better for them. There's kind of good business kind of reasons around that. And then you can kind of step into these different elements of the supply chain. But again, I think it's if you want to take that responsibility and risk on board because it aligns with your business.
You kind of talked us through the process of you sourcing green coffee at Counterculture. And it feels like the main thing is what you're saying there is like the direct trade and that kind of thing maybe just brings up more risk of going straight through rather than going through an importer where they're taking on some of the risks of you buying it, and that's basically it. Would you find that people are going to take more of that direct trade risk at bigger companies or more middle companies?
I think there's risk inherent in every coffee supply chain. Like even the spot ones. I mean, especially now where we've seen with coffee prices being so volatile. I mean, there's been a lot of defaults. There's been a lot of consolidation on the export and import side just because of how risky bearing the financial burden of paying for inventory and carrying it is for a lot of companies. I think that a lot of small companies have wanted to take on risk that maybe is more than necessary because coffee has made it look glamorous, to have direct relationships and to aspire to change the world through those. And I do think the coffee industry would be in a healthier place if we were all just a little bit more transparent about what we're actually doing and honest with ourselves about what we can achieve.
I don't know if this is a little bit of a spicy one here.
Spicy. He's getting spicy early.
Maybe I'm putting Katie on the spot for a spicy take here. What do you think about smaller or medium-sized roasters doing lots and lots of origin trips to do kind of direct trade or direct sourcing and spending a lot of money, tens of thousands of dollars to travel to these regions and then maybe not paying quite as much per kilo or per pound as they could?
Yeah, that's to me, that shows me their values, right? Their value is more in, and I don't want to say marketing because I think marketing is a good thing, but I guess in looking a certain way rather than really backing that up with their actions. I think everybody should travel. I think we should show coffee production to our customers and to consumers. We should make people excited about it. It's not a binary thing like you have to do one or the other, but that's a bummer. People should be balanced about it, right? They should not spend more money on the origin trip than they're willing to spend on the coffee.
Yeah.
But would you be saying, is this kind of what's being asked here? You would assume that direct trade means that you can work with the farmers to pay them the right amount, but you're saying maybe some places are doing direct trade so they can cut out the middleman and the cost and save themselves money.
Well, I think some coffee brands and some coffee roasters say the words direct trade and mean very different things by it. Maybe they traveled to Colombia once and
right.
visited a farm once and then work with an importer and just the importer
right.
buys it all. There's no further contact, no further relationship. But I think more the point is, you know, I'm kind of generalizing here, but in the consuming and buying world, we have this, you know, exoticization and kind of desire to travel and to be there. And we go there, spend all this money to kind of make selections and relationship, which is good. The relationship building is great. And we should be the side kind of investing in that, I think, and spending the money. But then, no, it has to come in balance, I guess, with what Katie's saying, with what are the values that play out when the rubber hits the road with the actual coffee purchasing. It's not just about traveling there, seeing it, taking some photos for social media and coming back. And I feel like, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, but I think counterculture actually shifted some of how they approach this kind of, I feel like it was eight or 10 years ago or something like that, where it was actually a little bit less travel at one point, but just making sure that it was regular visits, but a lot of kind of communication kind of externally or remotely on phone and on video meetings. So still have that really great relationship, but there wasn't the need to kind of physically be there and kind
just
of
FaceTime them.
Just FaceTime them.
Right.
What's up?
Is that correct, Katie, or did I get that wrong?
In our original direct trade, which I think was like 2008 or so, one of the things that we had to fulfill was a visit with the supplier once every 3 years. So that felt like it was a realistic departure from, at that time, coffee buyers were going everywhere, every country, all the time. Got to be boots on the ground, got to build relationships. And we said, no, you can achieve this once every 3 years. We also have had a big focus on trying to bring representatives of co-ops or owners of larger farms to visit us in the U.S., right? To come see the roasting facility. Last year when we had our company meeting, we brought in 3 suppliers to speak at the company meeting, and that counts as a visit too. It's still relationship building. It's still exchange of coffee ideas. It's just not on the farm. So I think there's ways to do it. Certainly during the pandemic, we didn't travel for a couple of years. And then once we've started traveling again, we've noticed we missed this and we've needed this, So it definitely takes a little bit of finesse to figure out how do you build a relationship, across cultures, across time zones, and how do you do that in a way that hopefully is a little bit more equitable? Like we can come to them, they can come to us.
Stop flying to us so we can host you. Fly us up to San Francisco or fly us to Melbourne so we can take us out on the town. Show us the city.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for the relationship building is so critical, especially with coffee procurement, coffee sourcing, right? Whether it's locally with your importer or whether it's with an exporter or a producer group, ultimately everyone's trying to make pretty long plays here. Like coffee is, generally a once a year harvest. You're buying coffee. The coffee doesn't get, either you're committing to it as it's literally being grown and financing that way, or certainly the producers. And then on the roaster side, you're buying coffee that then you'll sell over the next 9 to 10 months and your return on it isn't happening there. So managing that supply chain risk with just really good relationships is critical. So whoever you're kind of working with, I guess maybe a good summary is to develop those relationships, develop the shared values.
Right.
You know, in terms of creating a sourcing budget for a business or, you know, a green coffee budget, you know, how are there any tips that you could give to our listeners for like how you think that should be structured, some things to keep in mind as they tackle that?
Yeah, well, I can tell you how we do it at Counterculture. You know, we start with forecasting, and that's like a sales forecast. How much coffee do we think we're going to sell? Mm-hmm. And in what format? Like which blends are we going to be selling? We do that twice a year before the Northern Hemisphere harvest and the Southern Hemisphere harvest. And based on that, we figure out how much coffee we need kind of for each blend and for each product, and then where it should come from, either based on the flavor profile or where we want it to come from based on our relationship history with different farms. Then we reach out to the suppliers. We tell them, you know, this is what our quality expectation is. This is what we're buying and why. This is when we want it to get here to the United States. And this is the price that we're thinking about offering. And we kind of negotiate everything from there, sign the contracts, and then it kicks everything into motion. We definitely go into each buying season with a target price in mind for almost all of our coffee. Like over 90% of the coffee that we sell is blends. And blends don't have prices that don't change unless we make a complete change to our pricing structure. Single origins, we sell kind of market price, but that's a much smaller portion of our book. So we do go into, you know, to be fully transparent, we go into the buying season with a target in mind for our cost of production for green coffee. But we also know that the C market is incredibly unpredictable. And when the price spikes like it has in recent years, we're going to have to make some adjustments. I mean, even last year, we contracted a bunch of coffee in September, right before the Northern Hemisphere kicked off. Then the coffee price started spiking in November, just as like the harvest was kicking into high gear. We had to adjust some of the pricing that we were expecting based on that. And or in the places that we didn't adjust pricing, some of that inventory didn't materialize. You know, the farmers didn't end up selling their coffee to that cooperative because they could get a better coffee market price somewhere else. And then the cooperative didn't have the coffee to export to us. So, you know, we're always going to have to kind of look at things and make adjustments. We can't just say, this is a great price and take it or leave it at all times. We always reflect on the season before, and we're trying to sort of prioritize value, like thinking about what are we getting for the price. We definitely want to ensure that our business is good for the producers that we're working with, but it also needs to be good for our customers, because that's what's really going to make long-term sustainable coffee supply chains. It can't just be about favoring one side over the other. So, you know, sometimes that means paying more. Sometimes that means buying a little less volume if the price needs to be higher. But, you know, we just can't fit that into our program. But it always means being clear with our partners about what's possible. You know, just saying, we're looking at the numbers, we're going to see what we can do, and be really smart and fair about that. We have a process also to kind of keep track of how coffee supply chains, how our suppliers kind of fit into our business program, and kind of the cost to serve almost. Like, how easy is it to work together? How is the quality of the coffee actually? How is the price? How difficult is it to negotiate or have clarity on what's happening? And that kind of assessment allows us each year as we go into our forecasting to be really clear on, okay, these are the people that we should grow with, because these are the people where it's working. And, you know, maybe these are the people that we don't want to walk away, but this is not where we should be putting more volume as our business continues to grow. And we're really upfront and transparent about that process as well.
Yeah, I think that's such an important message for the industry to hear at the moment, as all of these pressures come on for roasters. And I know it's a little bit the same in the US, and certainly in Australia, the cost of operating a business here is just going through the roof. So there's the green coffee price, which is obviously changing a huge amount, but there's all of the associated costs around it. And I know that a lot of coffee brands are re-looking at, what are they buying and who are they buying it from? And I think there's a positive to refreshing that and challenging kind of old assumptions. But there's also a real risk that you've kind of pointed out is, what is the long-term cost for some of these things? You can have a real short-term win of like, I paid a little bit less per kilo or per pound for this new green coffee. But you've either moved to a new relationship, which carries its risk in both reliability, but also like, what's the message you're telling people if you're just changing to a whole new relationship? And then the other thing is the cost of managing that coffee that you kind of don't know until it hits the ground in the roastery and you're working with it day in, day out, is that you could be spending, tens and tens of hours, thousands of dollars in R&D and problem solving and stress in patching up issues with customers or with equipment because things are lower quality and you're having this mismatch of the promise. So I think that's such a valuable thing for people to kind of keep in mind, that, you can make these short-term wins, but you really need to consider what's the flow-on effect that could happen to your brand as well.
Just jumping back to something you said before, where you were buying a certain coffee and then the prices rise, then the farm was like, cool, we want to go get more money elsewhere. Is that a normal occurrence? Like, is there an agreement there, or is it normal that the price shoots up, you just lose the coffee and they'll go to the higher bidder?
It certainly feels like a new problem, at least for me. I've been working in coffee sourcing for a decade, and these past couple of years have been the most tumultuous in that time. And that's just reflected in the kind of up and down that we see in the market. But to be clear, it's not really like a farmer that is, well, it is a farmer that's deciding that, but we don't have a contract with the farmer. Where that's happening is when we have a contract with a co-op, and the co-op is relying on its members to deliver coffee. And a co-op is usually comprised of hundreds, if not thousands, of farmers. They tend to be a lot smaller in farm size, so maybe a lot more marginalized. Delivering coffee might represent, a lot more work than somebody else that's just has a big farm and has a big warehouse where they can store coffee until they're ready to ship it off and export it. So I don't really blame the farmer in that situation for the choice to maybe sell coffee to somebody that drives up to their farm and offers them a good price, but it leaves that co-op in a tough position because they might not be able to fill all of the contracts that they promised at the beginning of the year. So for us, it's like, it's not an immediate, oh, well, that happened, we don't ever want to work with you again. It involves work for us to replace that coffee, right? Like, we have to go out, figure out where to buy new coffee, and it is not going to be at a price that's usually as competitive as the one that we agreed upon a few months ago. So it's something that we have to work around and think about as we kind of move into the next season. But it did not happen to us until before 2022. We never had that problem because specialty coffee had always been trading at a differential above the C market. This phenomenon where the C market is at levels that specialty coffee previously traded at is something that has never happened in my lifetimes. So it's unprecedented territory for all of us.
Oh God, I just get, whenever I hear the word unprecedented,
I
just think of COVID every time. It just takes me back to that time. We're living in unprecedented times, which we were.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely causing lots of different movements in how people are sourcing and the pressures on businesses. If you had one quick piece of advice for a coffee roaster, who all coffee roasters are trying to manage this, right? Of their price versus product versus values, maybe. Do you have one quick piece of advice that you would say a coffee roaster should keep in mind as they navigate all of that?
Well, I would say that more communication and more transparency is better. You know, a lot of times we can assume somebody's motivations behind something. And I think being curious and asking, you know, why weren't you able to fill the contract? What exactly happened? Rather than just assuming what I basically just did, which is, oh, they could get a better price. I mean, maybe, you know, in some coffee supply chains, maybe they were hit by climate conditions, right? And they just didn't have the yield, or there's an issue in the labor market where they don't have as much seasonal labor passing through. And so they weren't able to harvest all the coffee. I think asking questions and trying to understand the why rather than just assuming that somebody had bad intentions is probably good. And leading with that yourself. You know, if you're going into a season and saying, I can't buy as much coffee as I did last season, you know, be prepared to say why. Say, because this is what my customers are, these are the blends that my customers are buying and your coffee doesn't fit into that. Or this is, you know, these are the margins that my company runs on, and it's not a huge profit. And so I'm looking to buy the best value coffee that I can buy. And like, this coffee has a place on the menu, but maybe not in the volume that it did before. So I think just trying to, number one, be curious. And then number two, provide a lot of context for your own decisions. Like, be willing to be transparent. I think that's how you kind of, it might not solve the problem in the immediate moment, but hopefully you get better at talking about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it kind of builds trust with the right people over time.
I love it. Great advice.
I was going to ask you, how do you think that we need to communicate this with consumers? Like, obviously you're being very transparent with everything. Is there a level of education that we need to push forward onto the consumers to help them understand? Or what's the best way, or how have you kind of tackled it?
I'd say I'm definitely, every day I'm tackling it in a different way. I feel like I'm always kind of testing different theories on what will work and trying to figure out how to do that on a large scale, and talk to a lot of different customers too. I mean, we have direct to consumer, we have wholesale customers, and then we have our customers that are grocery buyers, like in the grocery stores, but then people that go into grocery stores and buy our coffee as well, who's a totally different type of customer than somebody that's going to actively seek out our website, you know, and be like looking for coffee and coffee information there. So, I mean, I thought about this a little bit, and this might be a little bit of a hot take. I believe that we in specialty should talk more about what's working rather than what's broken. You know, I think we have spent a long time, you know, promoting the message saying like, just don't buy coffee from these people because it is the bad coffee. But we're all part of the same system. You know, we're all working under the same system. Farmers are selling a lot of their coffee commercially as well as to specialty markets. And more importantly, I really just feel like it is not a good move to define ourselves by what we are not. You know, we need to define ourselves by what we are and help people understand what to look for, what to cheer on, so that they can seek that out no matter where they drink coffee. So for counterculture, we've really kind of been honing in on, of course, there's going to be a lot of sourcing information and varieties and things like that, but there's a lot of transparency. Price transparency is huge for us. And there's traceability, like knowing who produced your coffee and where it's from. And I think, you know, we can sit around and we can say, okay, well, there's still like, maybe that's not going to guarantee the best outcome for farmers every single time. But I don't think it's about striving for perfection in everything. I think it's about helping people help us make progress, you know, and simplifying the message and making it more focused on what we're doing rather than what we shouldn't be doing is, I think, going to be the way that can get us there.
Yeah, definitely.
Well said. That was beautiful.
Thanks. I just have to figure out how to put all of that into action to like 20 different types of customers.
Yeah, exactly. But just quickly, customers, I did want to ask, sourcing coffee from all over the world, there are so many different flavor profiles, so many different types of coffee. How much does the consumer drive what you're doing versus you as a company just being like, this is cool and I want to share it with people?
Yeah. I will say, I do think right now consumer preference is influencing what we source more than it has in other times. I think that's the moment that we're in. I think people are more trying to be open-minded about coffee and realizing like what drives purchasing. Obviously, as a coffee, nerd, I want to shape taste, but I also want my business to succeed. So I want to respond to what people want. And there's some there are positive examples to that. Like, for example, I don't know what's happening in your market, but here we've been seeing decaf demand exploding. We're like buying twice as much decaf than we ever have before. So it wouldn't be smart for me to be like, oh, well, decaf's not real coffee, so I don't want to figure that out. What I want to do is like source better decaf because people want to drink more decaf. The other thing that I think is like a good example of following where the trends are going, but also it maybe relates to some of the trend making that we have seen happen, is that our fastest growing product at Counterculture is kind of our medium to light roast blend. I bet in a year it's going to be our biggest seller. And previously it's always been the kind of darker roast that has been the most popular product. So I love seeing this shift because it tells me that, consumer preferences are changing and I can help meet them there, but it's changing and it's aligning closer to what I have been so excited about and what specialty has been preaching for decades. So I think you want to try to find both opportunities on your menu. Like you want to try to push the zeitgeist, hopefully, and get people excited about coffee in a different way. But, to keep customers and to grow your business, you probably also want to buy the things that they want to buy right now.
Bit of push, bit of pull. Is there any other language or phrases that we as an industry use that you think we should stop using?
I mean, I always bristle whenever I hear people say our producers, like you own them.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a pretty easy change that we can make.
What should we use instead?
Our supply chain are maybe not our partners, but the partners that we work with.
Yeah.
Just not the ownership.
Work with, I think is a good, good word.
Yeah.
Or words.
Yeah. No, that's a good
Something
one.
like that. And, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Like, I think I'm the same. The idea of people discovering coffee always like rankles me. It's a very kind of, maybe not white savior, but certainly a very kind of Western, like going in and it wasn't there until we found it.
Until I saw this coffee, it didn't exist. I discovered it. No.
Yeah. And I think taking more ownership in general, we're saying, just don't take as much ownership over the coffee product. And really kind of recognize that huge amount of people behind it who kind of grew it and who kind of brought it to life initially, and that we're kind of custodians in passing that along. Yeah, that's what rankles me.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, so I'm a green coffee buyer at a coffee roaster. I'm responsible for sourcing. What are some of the things that you think we need to be responsible for taking control of there?
I think be responsible for being clear about the price that you can pay for coffee. And hopefully, if you can pre-contract the coffee, then more of that price can end up in the hands of the exporter or producer. But if you are buying spot, that's fine too. I think be responsible for understanding how coffees perform on your menu and give that feedback to the supply chain, even if it's just down to the importer, but ideally to the supplier as well, so that people have that follow through. They don't know just what you want when you're buying from them, but they know kind of how the coffee did and how that might play into a future business opportunity, like where they can grow alongside you, because they understand, how their coffee played into your success or to your struggles.
Love it. Great.
Does that kind of answer things? Okay.
It did. Yeah. Thank you. It's
getting pretty exciting, and I'm getting fiery. I think it's time for an extra hot take with 2 sugars. What a segue.
I know.
With 2 sugars or a hot tamale, as we were saying, coming out of the Bay Area. There's got to be some good hot tamales up there.
All right. I'm hoping this isn't too spicy. My hot take is that describing how a coffee tastes is way more useful than just assigning it a score. So
I like it.
I think that flavor notes, along with some additional context, like where the coffee came from, the variety that it is, the processing, any certifications, this is what actually helps people figure out whether a coffee is going to be a good fit for them, a good fit for their menu. I don't think a score alone does that. You know, when somebody tries to sell me a coffee by saying, this is an 86, my first thought is, okay, what does that mean? An 86 from Ethiopia is very different to me than an 86 from Brazil, you know, and an 86 point Caturra is not exactly interchangeable for an 86 point Catuai. I'm also thinking about like, who gave it that score? You know, who are they calibrated to? What's their own personal bias? Do they like really fruity coffees or do they hate really fruity coffees? And so what am I getting myself into? If that person told me, you know, this coffee tastes citrusy and floral, but it also is a little bit nutty and it finishes papery, I'd immediately know what that means. And I'd be able to know a little bit better about whether or not that was a good fit for the kind of coffee that I want to buy. And that is a lot more useful. It would help me make better decisions. And it would help me, if I were selling coffee, kind of find the roasters, the right audience for each coffee that I was selling, excuse me. So I think flavor gives us a shared language and scores flatten nuance. So my hot take is that it's actually good for the industry to move towards more of a descriptive analysis of coffee than a score-based analysis. And I'm looking at Ben.
I'm looking at poster boy Q grader over
your
here.
history. But you asked for a spicy take, and I gave it a lot of thought. I was like, this is the thing I've been thinking about, and it's the spiciest of all takes.
Well,
go ahead.
Where do we go, Katie?
Go ahead. No, come on, let's talk.
I agree that it should. Yeah, the end.
I agree.
And look, I think it's kind of what you were saying before of like the phrase of like a false binary, right? There's the conversation.
Yes.
I mean, who would I be if I'm not arguing this cause right now with all of the conversation in the industry about the Q grader change and the shift from the 2004 form to the CBA and all of that kind of conversation, which I think is all really good combo. And you know, your point is really well taken that ultimately what we care about, what consumers care about is what we're experiencing in the cup. And we're not tasting it going, that's a delicious 84.75 coffee, you know.
Yeah.
So descriptors, great. I just think that the score, or do you find that a score is a good shortcut to framing up like what pocket of product that might fit in, right? Like whether is this a blend coffee or is this a micro lot coffee?
Yeah, it definitely works within my organization. Like it works when you have a cohort of people that are calibrated, right? And where 86 and 84 mean the same thing. And we've definitely gotten there within counterculture, like when we're scoring coffees and deciding, is this a blend or is this not? And then to a certain extent, we've achieved that even in our supply chains because we work with the same people year after year. And so they know what it is that we're looking for. And I agree. I don't necessarily I maybe don't want to lose scoring altogether, but I guess what I'm saying is that overall, I think that, you know, like I said before, scores kind of flatten nuance and flavor gives us a shared language. I still think that I don't think that describing flavor is easy.
Yep.
Like, I think that is going to take a lot of training to learn how to do that really well. And I think there should be a robust system around that. Like, it shouldn't just be anything goes. There has to be a lot of education, training, hopefully calibration about what different flavors are and how they show up in coffee. But I think it could be cool for the industry to move beyond focusing on the number, still have a rigorous training program, but focus more on describing flavor and describing what makes a coffee what it is, which is some of that sourcing information, like who produced it, you know, what's the history there, what's the variety, all of that.
Well, I'll give you my quick hot take here is that I think that importers can be great, okay, and can be a great part of the coffee industry. So playing on a little bit from our conversation during this chat, I think that you know, often there can be a tendency to malign importers and kind of point the finger. But I think increasingly they're playing a critical role in a stronger kind of coffee supply chain ecosystem where they are specialists in importing and holding all of this risk of finance and warehousing and facilitating kind of great relationships, whether they're the ones with the relationship to the producer or they are supporting a buyer's kind of relationship there. So I think some little props out to the importers who are really evolving and kind of addressing those needs that I think can actually have a great ripple on for the different business models within the coffee industry.
I totally agree. And they're full of legends too, like people that, have spent a lot of time in coffee, have interacted with a lot of different businesses. And I've just had such great mentorship from different people working at importing companies over the years. Like they have a different focus than roasters do, but they have so much knowledge and they're always willing to share it.
Kind of the tone that Katie's set here is having like transparent, honest conversations with what you need, what's important to you, and finding the importers who say, yes, we can help do that. And I think there's
make the call, have the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, my hot take. I think coffee needs to be as respected as wine, if not more. People just look at it as this everyday cup of coffee that they're getting. But this is an organic product that is picked, that is processed, that is sent around the world for you to have. This is representing different terroirs in different countries. You can get one coffee that tastes like berries and cream. You can get another coffee that tastes like chocolate and caramel. We need to show it the respect that it has, whether that means from the prices that we're paying for that cup of coffee or just how we generally talk about it. Because coffee isn't just something that is thrown in a can or spat out of a machine. This is a beautiful organic product that deserves respect.
Yes.
Absolutely agree.
And this is definitely not a hot take for the people on this podcast. This is more of a hot take for the general public out there or some of the general public. I wasn't really setting up something that people were like, it would be funny if you turned around like, wrong, Rowan. Yeah. I disagree.
No. Yeah.
All right. That about brings us to the end of the episode. Katie, thank you so much for your expertise, knowledge, and sharing that with a listenership of amazing coffee enthusiasts that are out there. One thing that we want to do at the end of every episode is, do you have a little shout out for someone in the coffee community that's doing some great work? Maybe they don't get a light shone on them enough. And we wanted to give you the stage here to give them a little shout out.
Yeah, well, my shout out goes to somebody that Ben knows really well. It's my friend and occasional mentor, Trish Rothgeb.
Woo!
Trish is one of the people that helped shape the coffee industry. She coined the term third wave. But what I really wanted to shout out right now is that she's kind of meeting a lot of change in her life with a lot of openness. These past couple of years, she's pivoted her business, Wrecking Ball Coffee. She launched a YouTube talk show called Watch the Shift. And she's even taking continuing education classes at UC Berkeley. She wants to write a book. I just think she's a real inspiration because she's reinventing herself, but she's not changing everything about herself. She's really just evolving with intention. So I want to just shout her out. Everybody should pay attention to what Trish is doing.
So much love for Trish. Yeah, absolute legend. Has given so much to the industry as well and is always so generous with her knowledge and kind of what she wants to build for everyone together.
Yeah.
So love that you dropped Trish in there.
Beautiful shout out. And thank you so much for all of the great information you've given us. Obviously, you can find more at Counterculture. If you're over in the States, find your local cafe that's serving it up or just go and buy some for yourself to brew at home. If you want to reach out to us on the podcast, you can hit us at hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com. You can find us on the socials. Is there anything else I'm forgetting? If you're listening on, Spotify or iTunes right now, just honk that subscribe button. Don't just tap the screen, punch the screen with enthusiasm. I will not take responsibility for broken phones. That is just something that I will say on the pod here. But yeah, your support is loved. We love seeing the numbers continue to go up and more listeners getting on board. And we love to hear from all of you. So yeah, thank you very much for being a listener. I did want to bring up, Ben actually said he received a message from the emergency services this morning. And you wanted to tell us what this message said. What was that message?
It was, there's too much anaerobically processed coffee on cafe menus this week.
Oh, wow. That's a weird message you get from the emergency service. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Katie.
That was so fun. Thank you.
That was great.